Well, welcome to God-Sized Stories, David.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you. And of course, people in my audience who watch Fox News and Bloomberg and CNBC, they probably will recognize you from being an advisor on those shows and on those networks. And but it is a true pleasure to talk about this very important book that you have just launched. Really, it was just released last month, I believe.
Yeah.
So very excited about it. It's a very important book and very different. First of all, David, you are a unicorn on Wall Street. Let's just start by talking about what makes you pound the table, David. Tell my audience.
Well, I take that as a compliment. I think it is rare. I want it to be less rare, that there be a person of faith. There's a lot of Christians on Wall Street, but I think someone who would write a book about a distinctly Christian view and understanding of work, making the case that our careers matter, and not merely because we can provide from them, or because we can become charitable from them, or even because we will receive opportunities for evangelism out of our work. I think all of those things matter, but fundamentally what I'm saying in the book, and what I've really devoted my life to, is the belief that the work itself matters, and it matters to God, and that God made us to do this work, that his very intent for his people from the Garden of Eden, from the very moment of creation, was that mankind be productive, be creative, that we build things, that we produce goods and services that enhance other people's quality of life. And that's how I view financial services. But my theology of this applies to any other industry as well. I just happen to try to apply it here on Wall Street.
Yes, and you say something about the book, that a person's work does not open the door for them to do significant things, but that their work itself, is the significant thing. So elaborate a little bit on that perspective. It's a little different from what we hear, in other books and throughout in the church, really.
Well, and I think that that's exactly right, that that there are people who are in the church who for years and years have been well-intentioned. They mean well. I think they love the Lord, but they have advocated a belief of work that its purpose is to lead to things that can matter, that it can help you do other endeavors that are significant. And it avoids what I refer to as the inherent dignity of work. That there is something in the work itself that matters. And it's interesting, in the American tradition, the kind of history of our country put a big prize on the virtue of work, that hard work showed character. And I totally agree with that. But even then, I don't think it goes all the way to the point that I actually believe technology code matters, that I believe inventing the wheel mattered, that I believe starting a fire mattered. The way we cook dinners in restaurants or at home, or delivery services, matter. And over the course of the years, we all benefit from the work of others. We go to work every day, and it just has gotten removed from our consciousness. How many people are being served by our work? How many people are being served by the work of those around us? And that's why I really want us to have a more holistic appreciation of the fact that in our work there is a purpose. And I think so many people are disconnected from that purpose. It's leading to a lot of problems in the society, and that's really what the book is intended to address.
Yes, that's the heart of the book, really, right? It identifies that our society right now has an issue concerning value of work and the dignity of work, and even, I mean, I will tell you this: when I first moved to the United States, and I was interviewed for my first job, my boss, after he hired me, he said this, and I was, of course, first time in the, not first time in the country, but, recently moving to the country. So I spoke English, but I really didn't know the United States work, ethic for that matter. But he told me this. He said, one of the reasons I hired you is because you're from Brazil. I have worked with people from Brazil, and I know how they are hard workers. They do not make excuses for not working. And I thought that was so strange. And I think your book addresses the fact that our society lost a little bit of that significance and that importance of making work a priority, right?
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I think that culturally, the United States has suffered from from its own success. That we have become such a prosperous society that it's enabled some to be a little complacent. A child can enjoy the comforts of loving parents and a stable home without knowing why they feel comforted. And that's because they're a child. But see, we have adults that don't understand that the reason we have the prosperity, the reason we have the conveniences and comforts of modern economic life are because we had a very hardworking and industrious society. And that complacency not only jeopardizes future economic growth, which is, of course, the subject of my day-to-day life, economics, productivity, what it means to basic growth of jobs and wages and profits and the things that matter to the next generation. But see, I think it also affects the soul of society, that people do not feel a purpose, and that there is a God-created need for us to feel useful. And the reason we have that is because we're made in the image of God, and God himself was productive. He created the world and asked us to create out of what he created, to build and steward and grow out of what he had built. So it's in all of us. It's in our very being. And those that don't get to find that opportunity or don't seek it, or don't really pour themselves into it, I think they're depriving themselves of something that can provide a lot of inner meaning, a lot of inner satisfaction. And I think your analogy, an immigrant coming from another country where that work ethic is just sort of, necessary.
Absolutely.
To me, we have to have that same spirit. America's immigrants, what we call Ellis Island immigration, at the turn of the 19th century coming into the 20th century, this was incredibly hardworking. I'm sitting in New York City right now, where a lot of these immigrants settled, and you have various different, traditionally ethnic neighborhoods where people built specializations. There was the garment district, and there was musical areas, and there were just different, of course, finance, theater, but this was all a byproduct of people pouring themselves into a craft. And the beauty of this modern economy is people don't have to do that with something they're not any good at. They don't have to do it with something they hate. People have things that they are naturally skilled at, that they can go do that work. And that's what I want, is for people to really embrace the idea of finding where their talents lie and then maximizing it, and viewing that work as a core part of our identity.
You said something that really spoke really loud in my spirit, because you say Christians, we believers, like those who really want to serve God wherever they are. We always sometimes struggle with the fact of like secular work versus ministry work, and especially those who want to see the kingdom prosper on earth, and we want to carry out the Great Commission. And then some people feel stuck, right, in a corporate job, and sometimes see no value for the kingdom. And you make a case in your book about how that view is completely flawed, and that we need to change that, which is a very different perspective from what I've heard before. Can you expand on that a little bit, like for somebody who's out there and they say, I love Jesus and I want to make his name known, but I'm here, I don't know, typing data entry on my job. Talk to that person and to encourage them how much their work matters.
Well, what's a beautiful thing is that the very word for work in the Hebrew scripture, avodah, means work and worship. It's also used in the Old Testament at times for serve. In the book of Joshua, where he said, choose this day whom you will serve. It's the word avodah. But that's the word in Exodus, for 6 days shalt thou work and do all thy labor. And so this word itself grammatically doesn't allow us to believe that on one hand there's secular work and on the other hand there's Christian ministry or worship, that the pastor job is more important than the typist or the chef or the lawyer. It is a flawed view of kingdom, because the kingdom of God is bigger than that. The kingdom of God is bigger than the Sunday morning church. It is all of his domain, everything in the earth that Christ is Lord over. And this is how he created the world. He created the world for us to go steward this garden and build a civilization. So there's a long tradition in Protestant theology called the priesthood of all believers. The notion that Martin Luther used to talk about, the person who makes the shoes is every bit as important as the priest. I care deeply for the work that people in church ministry do, but I think that God cares deeply for the work that the butcher and the baker and the cobbler do. And so this idea that I refer to in the book is dualism, that there's a distinction between the sacred and the secular. That's what we have to tear apart. We have to understand that all of this is God's kingdom. And what are people who work in these other professions that people like to call secular? What are they doing? They are people made in the image of God, workers whom God cares about, doing work that serves an object, other people whom God cares about. And the idea that God cares about the first dot, the worker, and the second dot, the person being worked for, and doesn't care about the line in between, the work itself, doesn't make any sense. And I believe that this, to me, is the largest issue that has held the church back in a robust theology of the marketplace of commercial society, is that it is believed that there is important work we call ministry and then less important work. And I think that it is totally devoid of what the Old Testament and New Testament teaches us. Avodah, when we work, we are worshiping God.
I love it because history backs up your concept in this book, right? Because if we look at history, anytime that we've had a major, whether it's the Industrial Revolution, different times in history where the world really grew economically, and even here in this country, we see so many people of the Judeo-Christian faith, whether Jews or Christians, people who really follow those principles of working hard, and they're throughout the scriptures. Whether it's Old Testament or New Testament, we see Paul making tents to be able to survive, right? We see all of those things. So there has been somewhere, I believe, that the church kind of lost a little bit of that connection, right? To teach us today that you do not have to be, particularly in a full-time ministry, to make a big impact for God. And I saw that throughout my life with my husband. We're being married almost 25 years now. And he is, he's always been in secular work. He's an operations executive, and he's always done that in his career. But he has made such a difference. People that he doesn't work with anymore reach out to him because of his hard work, but also his character. Whether and so you make a case very strong there about the importance of really being fruitful and whatever you are led. But I do have to address a thing, so because there is a thing called workaholism.
Mhm.
That can be dangerous. So do you like not worry about workaholism, about people like burning themselves out, ignoring their families? Can you address that a little
Yeah,
bit?
so I have two approaches to this, and I talk about it in the book. First of all, I don't understand the word, because where does it come from? From It's a derivative from alcoholism, and I think most people would agree that abuse of alcohol can destroy somebody's life and destroy a family and be physically, mentally, spiritually, medically very abusive. And it's kind of offensive that we do a derivative of that to the idea of work. Now, is the problem when someone is ignoring their family that they're working too hard, or is it that they're ignoring their family? See, I think someone can work really hard and not ignore their family, but I don't think someone can abuse alcohol and be a good family person, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I know what people mean by it, and I want to be sensitive to that nomenclature. But I think workaholism is a lazy word that we came up with to sort of support a lower view of work. The pejorative is meant to try to suggest, and this is what I say to people: if you're a Christian and you have a friend who is not a Christian and they are doing all kinds of drugs all the time, and then they become a Christian, you're going to want them to not do drugs anymore. You're going to tell them part of the Christian life is you can't do drugs anymore, right? But if they work really hard, are you going to tell them, okay, well, now you're a Christian, you need to stop working hard? I mean, of course not. No one has to give up a successful career. If anything, they can channel it in an even better way to the glory of God. So I am very sensitive to the idea that there may be people who ignore their family. I don't happen to believe that's the primary issue we're struggling with in society. When I see millions of men between 20 and 35 years old that are not pursuing careers, that are not becoming better candidates to be married, that are playing video games, smoking pot, staying at home, not moving into a functional role in society where they can be productive in a career and vocational calling. I think that, to me, is the larger issue. But are there pockets where there are people who, in their devotion to their work, it can become an idol? Of course, I'm against all idolatry. Idolatry of career, idolatry of status. I'm also against people who idolize their spouse. I'm against people who idolize their children. I'm against people who idolize anything that isn't the one and true God. So when we worship the one and true God, what did he ask us to do? He asked us to be faithful spouses, faithful parents, and workers who are not ashamed, diligent workers who work for the Lord rather than men. So I appreciate the concern, but I think we have to put it in the right cultural context. Very few people would look at our society right now and say we're struggling from people who are working too hard.
And David, you have you are part of a group of leaders or Christian leaders that are also preaching this, and even in very practical ways too. I've interviewed before, like Craig Rochelle, which I'm sure you know him too. There are a lot of leaders out there that are kind of calling attention. Listen, we have to, as believers, to have, to change our habits, to have our routines, to have that balance between work and life. Not You cannot ignore your family or ignore your work, and there is a way of doing it the right way. It's just what you were talking about, and you do say in your book, you say that there is and I'm reading from a deterioration of purpose, community, and dignity in our society. Through an understanding of work that's properly formed, we discover our purpose. So let's talk about purpose, because there is just so much talk about purpose everywhere, right? It's identity and purpose. They are like the buzzwords of Christianity in the past 20 years. So Talk to someone out there, and there's that woman out there, and much of my audience is female. And I know I have a lot of friends like me, myself. I was in corporate world, and then we felt led to step out of the corporate world. My kids were little, and we had no family at home. And not family at home, meaning no family around me, actually, to help us with children and stuff. And so we felt led for me to step down. And but that's when I started my ministry, really. So I was, while raising my little kids, I was still working. I don't have a gap in my resume on account of that. Right? And but talk to that mother out there who is now, she felt led that she needs to step out of the workforce right now to raise their kid. And but she has worked for many years. And that was like her purpose. Yeah. Talk to that mother, though, because we're talking so much about work. I want you to encourage her. Right
yeah,
now.
It's a really important point. I'm so glad you brought it up. It's come up a lot since the book came out, that there isn't any part of the book that speaks directly to homemakers, to working mothers, to stay-at-home moms. And all of that is within the theology of what I'm describing. But the book was sort of purposely meant to address certain vocational callings. And one of the cultural realities is that we have a very high participation right now of women working, and where the numbers have dropped is prime working age men. And so there's a part of the book that could seem like it's talking more that way because, frankly, that's where the bigger hole is in society. And yet the message that you're describing is one that I think is very, very important. And it comes with different challenges that are unique for women that are going to be raising kids. They either start a career later, or they leave a career, or they balance two together. There's different unique challenges, and all of it comes down to the same thing, which is wisdom. I don't even really care for the word balance, because it implies, even for a man, that they're trying to balance and hold in a perfect equilibrium the time that they may spend with kids, family, church, work. I think that each day is different. Sometimes each hour is different, and that all of the things are important, and that there are seasonal realities. And a woman is going to have a seasonal sense in which their kids need attention more, and another context in which various work priorities might. I know for myself that there were times I left the office early to go to a kid's school event, and there were times that I had to work late multiple nights in a row. But that's part of the wisdom you have to have in applying it. And I think that with the reality we have today of so many women that are working and coming in different stages of their career around the reality of their families, it's a tremendous opportunity, but also one that requires wisdom, and certainly from my vantage point requires all the encouragement that we can provide.
Absolutely. Yes, I think that's one of the things, is because a lot of women who have, like I got married later in life. I was 30 years old. I had a successful business in Brazil. I started working, I was 14 years old, just because that's how my parents instilled in me just that strong work ethic. Both of them worked. And so I started, I wanted to buy some brand name stuff. And my mom said, well, if you want brand name, you're going to have to go to work. And so I said, okay. So anyway, when I stopped working to raise my kids, working per se at a secular job, there's an identity thing that happens. And you have to really, and I love that I never thought of it that way, that we have to, instead of thinking about balance, that you think about wisdom. And it's so true, because God will show you what you need to do in what time in your life, in what stage in your life. There, like Ecclesiastes says there's a season for everything, right? And sometimes the season is that you need to focus on your children. So I need to ask you about this. You raise a concern in your book about this new generation, which we have already discussed.
Yeah.
What do you think that happened, David, that now we find this generation of hardworking parents, a lot of them raised by hardworking parents who don't want to work? Where are we making a mistake here?
I have a very strong opinion about this. I think that two things are true at once. That it was hardworking parents, largely in the baby boomer generation, that were the most productive generation in history, produced more goods and services, created more economic output than any generation in world history. But they were also the first generation that entered the workforce with an eye to this thing called retirement. That they had the longevity, the mortality, the life expectancy, combined with the possibility of financial and material prosperity with 401ks and IRAs and pensions and other financial resources, that they could theoretically end up finishing their life in a 20 or 25-year period of not working. And the imagery and the vision and the hope that has been sold to people is one of basically working so you can finish up on a 25-year vacation. So while the boomers worked very hard, they also messaged in a lot of cases to who are now millennials this notion that work was something you did for the purpose of not doing it anymore.
Wow.
And I believe that the millennials ran with that. Then you combine the fact that over the 30, 40 years that went by between boomers beginning to work and millennials becoming young adults, that you had a very prosperous society, economy expanded, the digital and technology revolution took off, and there was more freedom, more flexibility. And the millennials introduced things like work-life balance, which has basically meant code for working less and having more conveniences and privileges and amenities in their work. That's a little bit removed from the work ethic that I think a Gen Xer like myself or the baby boomers worked with. And so it's created a generational divide. But I don't fully blame the millennials. I think that a lot of it came from the messaging of retirement as the be-all and end-all, as opposed to the notion of, sure, you want to have more freedom and flexibility in your senior years, but you also still want to be productive, that the purpose of the work still matters. And the purpose of the work is not to get to a point where you're done doing the work. That this sort of wholesale exit where we take off to golf 7 days a week or go on a sailboat around all the time, all those things have their place, but I don't agree that it's why we work. And I think that messaging has been convoluted in the culture for decades.
That concept that you are sharing is not new, but it's new to this time, to this time of that. It is a very unique book in that matter.
Yeah.
Because what you said is very true. The message that we've been hearing is, oh, you need to worry about work and balance and save for retirement because you want to have enough money that you can do whatever you want to do at whatever time. And I'm all, of course, you are a financial advisor, so you are all for saving and being wise with your finances, but that's not the purpose, right? You even talk about investing in the kingdom and stuff. And I love the fact that because I have seen this in my own family. My mother was a working mother and a very, very intelligent woman that just did very well in her career and everything. When she retired, she got into depression.
Oh, yeah.
Because she lost her life's purpose, and she's a believer.
Yeah.
She loves Jesus. Didn't change that fact, but
Yeah.
I keep telling her, Mom, you lost your life. There's still purpose in your life. And even we were under Dr. Charles Stanley's teaching. He was our pastor for 20 years, and he said, you don't see retirement anywhere in the Bible.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, no, I talk about that a lot in the book. There's a whole chapter making that case. And I think you see it all the time where people that are used to being useful, they're used to being needed, And when they lose that, it can definitely create depression and all sorts of things. So
Yes.
I so appreciate all your questions today. It's really
Yes.
been a wonderful conversation. I'm so thankful.
I'm thankful too, David. And everyone, he is giving away a copy of his book to my audience. So just fill out the form. And I'm so excited. This is definitely a must read for this time. Thank you so much, David, for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. God bless.
God bless you. Thank you.